About to break down some top round one draft targets for the Cincinnati Bengals. If you want even more NFL draft coverage, then like the video right now. The more likes we get, the more draft videos we'll do. So if that's what you want, then just like it for me right now. Season is over for the Bengals. We did a mock draft already. And now it's time to take a look at some top 2024 NFL draft targets for the Cincinnati Bengals. Players that should or could be there in round one that would help them get back to their goal of playoff success and more than just making the postseason. First name on the list is, it's the name that a lot of people want, right? It's Brock Bowers, the tight end out of Georgia. And I mean, I can't blame you guys. He'll be a top 5 prospect for many in and around the NFL draft cycle. Probably not number 1, but he'll be a top 10, I think, borderline consensus and on every big board there outside of the people who just want to be contrarians. He's not just a tight end, and that is a very important thing to note. If you just try to use him as your typical inline tight end, you're not going to get the type of results that would justify a top 5, top 10 pick, whatever. But if you use him as kind of more of the move tight end, the way the Chiefs have used Travis Kelce, the way the Niners at times have used George, the way the Patriots use their great tight ends, the way the Falcons should have been using Kyle Pitts consistently. If you use him as a weapon, I mean, we saw him get handoffs at Georgia and bust them for massive gains. He can be a dynamic piece and in that 2, 3, 4, whatever, offensive playmaker category in this year's class. Now, he's not an elite blocker necessarily either. That's okay. And in the end, the positional value, not that many teams need a tight end or even you call him a big slot receiver. Not many teams need that type of guy, which could cause him to slide a little bit. But look how productive he was even from day one at Georgia. And there are not many players who legitimately, as like after their freshman year, you'd say, yeah, he can go pro and he'd be a first. Right? There's a couple every couple years. Bowers was one of those guys. He did miss some time this year with the ankle injury, did come back. He was awesome, man. He is a fantastic football player. If he is there somehow for you, when you are on the clock at pick number 18, either something bad has happened or you're sprinting to the podium. I think it's unlikely he gets to you. Speaking of that note, the other 5 offensive players who, yeah, I'd love to be picking one of them, but you didn't finish with a high enough draft pick. So Marvin Harrison is going to go top 4. Malik Neighbor is going to go top 6, most likely. Rome Odunze is probably going to go with minimum in the top 15 range, somewhere at that category. Joe Alt Olufashinu would be pretty tough to get outside the top 10. So let's go trade for one of those guys. You're just not going to get up. Trade up for one of those guys, I should say. A lot more names to come. Who do you want the Cincinnati Bengals to draft in round 1 of this year's class? It's the pinned comment of today's video, so if the ad comes here on YouTube, take advantage of it. Head down there and let me know. More targets here. How about J.C. Latham, the offensive tackle out of Alabama? He was, I think, the best offensive lineman this past season for the Crimson Tide. Been a staple of the line on the right side. I view him as a plug-and-play option at right tackle. And beyond your top-tier grouping of Fashanu and Alt, I would argue Latham's probably next up on that list for me. The numbers at times were a little bit more inconsistent this year, in parts because the quarterback play and how they handled the offensive structure and holding on to the ball was a little bit more inconsistent this past year. You want a right tackle, I think Latham is your best bet. Next up is Amarius Mims out of Georgia. Now, we told you how many snaps J.C. Latham played for you this past season. You know, Latham was up in the 870-plus figure. That is more this year than Mims played his entire career at Georgia. It was all on the right side. I think he has traits to play left tackle, though, so he can flip him over there, and I think that's fine. Because he's a project to a certain extent anyway. He has shown impressive gifts and traits, and when he's been out there, he's actually been really good. 2 hurries allowed all season long after kind of a late chance to play down the stretch last year and looked really damn good. But it's a gamble because you've got a season of sample size here on Amarius Mims. That's not a lot to go off of. Next up is Taliesin Fuaga, who I think is one of, if not the, maybe, best run blocker in this year's class. I think there are some concerns I've seen over, can he stay at right tackle? Sometimes I think we get cute and we go, he can't play tackle, put him at guard, and then they stay at tackle. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I would certainly start him on the right side of the offensive line. Testing will matter here. I'm curious what the exact arm length ends up looking like, but he didn't allow a sack this year at Oregon State, and what admittedly was much more, it was basically an even split of pass snaps and run snaps. It was a run-heavy offense for the Beavers, but really good mauling ability on the right side. If you want to, a bookend of Brown and Fuaga is a very fun, powerful duo at tackle. Next up is Tyler Guyton, who he has played some left tackle, was mostly on the right side. To a certain extent, like Mims, I think this is he can be better than he was in college. Play him on the left side, let him grow, develop. High upside offensive tackle. I think currently the traits and upside are better than the product. That's okay. Coaches will think they're going to be able to max him out. The run blocking was not particularly great for Oklahoma. Also, it's Big 12 football. It's not always the best. No sacks allowed, though. Only 12 hurries. I think you see upside as a pass protector, like a lot of high-end traits there. And in general, not always, teams typically prefer if they choose to go down the route of setting yourself up for more success there by plugging them in on the figure it out and make them a left tackle, see if he can be dynamic, etc. From that perspective. All right, some more offensive line prospects here I did want to make note of. Guys that I don't think are going to be top 20 picks, but either they fall or maybe you trade down, whatever it's worth mentioning. Jackson Powers-Johnson, Graham Barton, Troy Fontenot, I think is going to be a guard. Barton might play center. Kingsley Suamaitai out of BYU, Jordan Morgan from Arizona. In general, it's a really good offensive line class. So what position would you ideally like to draft if you were the Cincinnati Bengals? Are you targeting offensive line? Do you want a receiver? Do you want something else altogether? Sound off for me in the comments right now. Let's hit some defensive players as well. First up is Dallas Turner, who I like a lot. He is not the biggest guy. He's a great athlete, though. He's a very gifted one, by the way. He plays bigger than his listed size, kind of like Nolan Smith, where he's not the biggest player, but he held up way better against the run, can do some drop stuff as well, which I don't like doing, but whatever. In a very poor, at the top at least, defensive draft class, would not be shocked to see Dallas Turner end up as a top 10 or at least top 15 pick. The numbers from 2023 and 2022, they did go up this past year. I thought they were going to, with Will Anderson not being opposite and getting home sooner. He is not the same caliber of prospect as Will Anderson. He might be a better athlete. That does not mean he's a better player or prospect at this stage. We are into the offseason now for the Bengals, and we are not going anywhere. If you want more NFL coverage on the Bengals draft, free agency, trades, news, rumors, coaching updates, etc., hit that sub button right now, youtube.com/BengalsTV. All right, more draft targets on defense. Again, edge isn't maybe your biggest need, but these are guys worth being in the consideration, so you got to consider BPA here. Latu out of UCLA. He was one of the most productive pass rushers in all of college football. I like his burst, good hand usage, and you see out of most young prospects there. If the medicals weren't a factor, he would undoubtedly be my top defensive prospect right now. And of course, I allow combine stuff to sort things out a little bit as well. But the medicals are a question mark for somebody who had to medically retire from Washington. So in a way, it's kind of the Jalen Phillips 2.0 conversation. The results, look, they speak for themselves. Consistent pressure, one of the best pressure rates in college football. 21.5 TFLs in 12 games played, 13 sacks. You did just draft an edge in Miles Murphy. If you want a second one to pair with Hendrickson too and Sam Hubbard, Latu makes a lot of sense. Jared Verse also is probably going to be a top 10 defensive player taken. I know, it's a light class, man. He would have been a first-round pick had he turned pro last year. He wasn't as impactful for a good portion of this season. He kind of did pick it up late against that down the stretch against Florida. He got going so good. He took over the game in the way I was kind of waiting to see it more consistently this past year. The end result was the numbers actually look very similar for Jared Verse from this past year at FSU and the previous season, which is a very good thing. It is slightly, and maybe there was an injury we didn't know about or whatever, but he had 4.5 sacks in his final 2 games. So they really picked it up down the stretch after a fairly slow start. 6 TFLs, by the way, in those 2 games. He dominated against Florida and Louisville. It was very impressive for him. Now, we have Bengals hats available for you from our friends over at Fanatics, the sideline hats. Go to chatsports.com/Bengals sideline. The link will be in the comments and the description of today's show. There's a wide variety of styles and fits and color schemes and brims, etc. So if you're looking for a new hat and you want it to be Bengals themed, go get yours today. Chatsports.com/Bengals sideline. To make it easier, link's going to be in the comments and the description of today's show. Some other wide receivers here, since if you don't have T. Higgins, you're going to consider, and it's a great receiver class. The other LSU wide receiver is Brian Thomas Jr. He's got that size-speed combo NFL teams love. He's in that 6'4"-ish range, 210-ish, and is going to run a 4.4, maybe a little bit lower there. He is your typical outside threat who doesn't bring you a ton of crazy yak, but he does get some big plays for you. 68 catches for LSU. He's not even like a elite tackle breaker, you know. That's what I mean by the yak side of it. 1,000+ yards as part of the Jaden Daniels, Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors trio that was oh so good. Kind of sounds familiar to other LSU years, except the current LSU defense was terrible, so they fired their DC. And hey, it's the Bayou Bengals. They get to stay and join up with another one. All right, Keon Coleman is next up here. I think Coleman and Thomas are going to battle for wide receiver 4 and 5 throughout this process. Thomas brings you more athletic juice, but man, never based on highlights. There might not be a better highlight tape at receiver than Keon Coleman. The contested catches this guy pulls off is insane. The actual rate is not that good because he had a lot of contested catches he was trying to make, and it's one of those like, they end up being contested catches because Coleman made an uncatchable ball a potential catch. It's one of those that, like, the volume's higher because they weren't great throws, and he almost found ways to do it. He put up very good numbers, despite not having the same athleticism as others, despite, Peyton Thorne at Michigan State back in 2022. And Jordan Travis was solid, but he's not Jaden Daniels, if he'd been healthy, Travis would have been, maybe a 4th-round pick, maybe. The body control is very unique, and if you're trying to replace T. Higgins, it's actually a great fit stylistically. So should the Bengals go for a wide receiver or tight end in Brock Bowers? You're not taking J.T. Sanders in round 1. Sound off for me in the comments. Y for yes, N for no. All right, back to defense here. Jer'Zhan Newton, the defensive tackle out of Illinois, disruptive presence on the interior. Doesn't have great size, in particular when it comes to the length involved, and that will raise concerns for many NFL teams. Despite that, he was super impactful against the run and the pass at Illinois. He always found ways to make a bunch of plays, and as a real argument to be defensive tackle 1 this year. TFL, sacks, tackles, you name it. He was able to make plays. Weird number to wear as a defensive lineman, but hey, you know what? It's fine, I suppose, in the end. If you want a trench player on the D-line, like a DT, Newton and the 2 Texas boys are probably 2 to consider. That's Byron Murphy, the second, and T'Vondre Sweat. 2 very different styles. Byron Murphy is more of your typical 3 technique. He offers you more pass rush. Sweat is a monster of a man at nose guard. So you can make an argument with maybe DJ not coming back that Sweat might make more sense. I also don't know if you're going to invest a top 20 pick on a nose guard. It's not typically how teams do business. He's also probably not going to get to you in round 2. Murphy wouldn't either, so you got to figure out your defensive line there in general. Finally, some of the top cornerback prospects in this year's class, and there are several others who, frankly, could have easily made this list, but ended up not. I mean, I like Kamari Lassiter of Georgia. I actually don't mind Kalen King either. But Terran Arnold, Khalil McKinstry, Nate Wiggins, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, all guys that you could maybe consider in the top 20 or at least top 25, top 30. But I think you're in decent shape at corner. I mean, Mike Hilton should be back. If he's not, you probably play Dak still maybe at nickel. And you have Cam Taylor, Britt, and DJ Turner. So I wanted to mention it because they're notable names. I'd be pretty surprised if corner was this team's round 1 pick.